Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week, it is going to be the turn of the Sheffield-based band, the 1000 Violins, because I recently spoke to their singer, John Wood, to find out more about life, love and poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Plus, they have got two new John Peel sessions that have come out on the Precious Recordings of London. The first one was recorded on the 25th of September 1985, and the second one, the 2nd of December 1986. Available from all good record shops, and also if you go to the Precious Recordings of London Bandcamp page, you'll find out more information of how you can get hold of those two reissues. So yes, this is the interview. So after several minutes of interest and casual chat, we get down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years, the musical awakening. Anyway, over to you, John.
I mean, I had a kind of the same reawakening as yourself, with exactly those same artists. From something like 5 years of age, I was listening to these old 78 records at the hand-me-downs from my aunts and stuff. And I used to sing along to them, and in particular, Johnny Ray, and people like Joseph Locke as well, singers like that. And I don't know, I think it is that, even at that age, I beginning to feel the power of music, and also hearing things on the radio, like as a child, an infant, things like Jumping Jack Flash, Reach Out, I'll Be There, and absolutely had hot and cold shivers going through my body with it. And then I kind of, as a child, I just did all the usual child things, and then one Thursday night, I remember that I just casually flipped one of the 3 channels or something like that, that was back then. And yes, I happened upon Top of the Pops and saw Mark Bolan, T-Rex doing Get It On, and again was completely mesmerized. The hot and cold just went all down my spine and all the rest of it. I was absolutely transfixed and didn't quite know what on earth was happening to me. It was like seismic sort of emotional responses. And I just thought, oh, wow, what was all that about? And then come next Thursday, I thought, I'm going to put that program on again, and hopefully he'll be on again. Yes. And he was, and then I became hooked to Top of the Pops. And then, like most people, it was just the whole world kind of opened up, or this particular world opened up anyway, with those very same artists that you've just mentioned, that just took me, I don't know, out of the old drum, existence of being a school child, yes, in the West Midlands, So
that was it. And were your parents at all musical? Did they?
No. I mean, the only bit of music I think my grandmother could play the piano as a child, and that was it. But no, there was no one musical. I mean, it was just, as I said, it was literally singing along to those records, and I just kind of stayed, obviously, with the music in just the music scene as it was from that point, from the 70s, the glam period, and through that, due to punk, and enjoyed that, and not really old enough to engage with it fully, but and then I had a tense. I had a guitar, but I wasn't a natural guitarist at all. I'm somebody who would have had to have had lessons to become a good guitarist, and I wish I had have been really, because I might have, one, I'd have probably been a better songwriter, and two, I would probably continue to be involved in music, but if I had have been an instrumentalist.
Yes.
But again, it was like singing along to my very poor guitar playing, and I kind of realised, well, actually, I think I'm quite a good singer. My guitar playing is really awful. I can just strum chords. And I'm quite enjoying this, and and thus, I don't know. I was doing some recordings of attempts at songs myself with some people I knew who had recording equipment and stuff, and it was a bit of a revelation to me, and I suppose, just felt that music was such a big part of my life. Everything was about going to a concert and all the rest of it. And so I suppose I just wanted to do it, if you like. And I happened to see, I think it was an ad in Melody Maker from somebody who had wanted somebody had a studio and wanted someone to sing on some demos for them out in Shropshire Way. And I don't know if he'd actually heard me or not, but I went along anyway and recorded these songs for him. And, that went well. I mean, I don't quite know what he had in mind at that point. I think he was just writing songs, and we weren't living right next to each other. So but they were actually friends of the owner of the studio. Was actually a friend of Colin Gregory and David Walmsley.
Right.
I think he'd been at university with Colin. Jim Murphy, his name was, and is, hopefully. And they went along to Jim's studio, and they'd heard the recordings that I'd made with him, and they liked the sound, I suppose. And then they contacted me and asked me if I would be interested in doing some recordings with them.
Nice.
Which obviously was a massive surprise to get, that phone call sort of thing.
Yes. Which was a very similar story to Fleetwood Mac in their kind of mid-70s period, wasn't it? Where Mick Fleetwood and I don't know, probably John McVie were looking for a studio, and they had a tape of Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks, and they thought, God, we love Lindsey's guitar playing. Perhaps we, it was just by chance, and they said, yeah, let's get him in the band, because he, frankly, they were struggling with players and getting problems with guitarists who are either going mad, finding God, or sort of having affairs with Mick's wife. So in a way, so it was like Lindsey said, yes, I'll do it, but only if Stevie comes along, because she's my girlfriend. That would be a bit problem with the relationship.
Well,
so it's a similar story. I like that.
Well, yes, without all the partners, of course, in tow. It was. As for the benefit of the people who were interested in the band and how it came to be. I mean, the real authorities was probably Colin, but as you know, he's a shy lad. They were the Page Boys. So for anyone who's really into 1000 Violins and wants to discover the lineage of the band, Colin and Dave were the Page Boys, and they put out at least one single, maybe two, I'm not sure. And I think obviously that Colin, as a main songwriter, wanted to sort of do something a bit different and form a band, which was 1000 Violins. I think with a change of direction.
Yes. So just going back, did you kind of leave school at 16, or had you also gone to university?
No, I didn't go to university at all until quite late in life, actually. No, I was very much, a kind of work experience, no hoper.
Yes, well, that was the early 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah, and absolutely. You know, a lot of my time was spent wistfully roaming around, derelict lands in the West Midlands, and you know, yeah,
Yes.
contemplating, shall we say?
Well,
Yeah.
we had a lot to contemplate. I mean, 79 Thatcher gets in, so that's kind of the Thatcher decade coming up. And then we had the Falkland War. We had, I suppose the miners' strike a bit later. Then we had Greenham Common, so we all thought we were going to be nuked. And then there was just huge amounts of unemployment.
As we are now, but yes.
so it was kind of a period of grimness and poverty, really. So there's a lot of bands that I've interviewed from that period, did have the job seekers enterprise allowance and wasn't it? There was a kind of an indirect grant from the government to.
Yes. Well, yes. I mean, it was obviously quite typically of the time. It was for bands of that kind. It was, eking out an existence through signing on, sometimes getting some payments coming in, and that was it. And that's the way the band kind of was able to function, I suppose.
Yes, that I don't know, £36 a week dole money and your housing benefit and council tax paid, so that was all good. But so what was just going back slightly, what was your first gig you went to then? What was the first kind of time you went to a live concert?
What, myself?
Yourself, yes.
Okay, it was. Well, there was firstly, I can remember the ones I missed out on, which was very painful. Obviously, like like Bowie and the Spiders and T-Rex and things like that. I also missed out on the Sex Pistols as well because I couldn't get into nightclubs. Who played in Wolverhampton? But my first concert was actually the Glitter Band, and at Wolverhampton Rollerdrome, who I still whose music I still love to this day. I think the Glitter Band made some great songs. And they was just as they were launching as a solo act. And I was taken because obviously I was a wee child, and I had to go with an adult and taken to this Rollerdrome to see. And the Glitter Band their van had broken down on the motorway. Yes, they were in a transit van as well. Believe it or not. And so they I remember them. They turned up late. They ran on stage, and there were all these fantastic glittery, costumes and all the rest of it. And they got on stage, and the sound was searingly loud to my, my infant ears. I'd got the hood of my Parker coat up to shield from the sound, and it was all quite overwhelming sort of sound and experience. And excuse me. Yes, but because they turned up late, well, I could only stay for about 20 minutes because we had to go and get the last bus home. But it was still nevertheless an experience that I was glad that I was.
Did they play rock and roll parts 1 and 2?
I can't remember, but there were that. I think they possibly did open up with I know it was a lot of drum bashing to start with, and all the saxophones, went for it and stuff like that. But obviously, I was so young, and it's just a vague memory now.
Yes, well, I know. I was excited. I did an interview with one of the Glitter Band a couple of years ago, I think. They were such an important band at that time, weren't they? That yes, there you go. That's life, isn't it? And I think the drummer went on to have quite a good, interesting career.
Pete Phipps.
Yeah,
he played with Denim, for example.
Yeah, Lawrence. Yeah.
Lawrence is Denim, I know.
And I think he did have an impressive CV. I don't know which member I spoke to actually, but anyway, it was a nice chat, so that was good. So then, sort of at the early 80s, we get to the punk, post-punk. Then 83, the year of the Smiths. I always think this is such a moment. So when did you sort of become part? When did 1,000 Violins begin? From Page Boy, was that just a sort of a?
It was. think it was 84. Yeah, it would be 84. And Colin and Dave were wanting to record this single pretty imminently because, as you know, they had contacts with Dan Tracy, who was running Dreamworld, the label Dreamworld. He was putting it out. They had a publishing deal with Fire, which they weren't very happy with, I recall. But so yeah, it was literally, actually, it wasn't just we like, you singing and stuff. It was like, would you like to make a record? And as somebody, as you can imagine, with stuck in Wolverhampton, and it was like, wow.
Yes.
I would, and I did obviously like what they'd done. I mean, there wasn't the technology then to obviously send me anything. I can't even remember whether they sent me a cassette, but I literally went down to the recording studio where they were, and that would have been the first time I sang the song Halcyon Days, and yeah, we did some demos. That's it at Jim's studio. So it would have been the first time I was given, there's the lyrics and there's some music, and let's see how it goes.
Yes.
And we want to make a record, so that we're doing these demos.
So you hadn't at that stage you hadn't played live with them.
No, I'd never played live. I hadn't. The only recording I've done, I say, was at friends' house. Really, I'd never had a proper recording session.
Yes, amazing. Because that single, obviously you hit it quite high, don't you? In that sense of it is a kind of indie classic. I mean, again, the production value at that time was brilliant. I mean, it sounds so good, and your vocal is so clear. So did you?
Yeah, well, the actual recording of Halcyon Days was recorded overnight on the Twilight cheap recording sessions with a guy called Pascal Gabriel, I think a Belgian producer. He was then unknown, and I think he went on to be quite successful during the early 90s with a lot of that kind of his productions. I think he might have been part of the the whole house or techno. I don't know, but I know he had quite a good career after that, despite the fact. Yes.
And did you get the chance to meet the famous Dan Tracy?
Well, of course. I mean, we were, Dan would allow us to very kindly stay at his place when we were playing in London. So we were often at his flat.
Yes.
Trying to not to make a nuisance of ourselves as best we could. And I suppose it was his, generosity that allowed us to, to play in London so often. Because, we could use that as a base sometimes for playing a few concerts around that area, the south.
Yes. And did you play the Living Room, Alan McGee's kind of little club down?
I honestly can't remember. It's quite possible. I mean, we were playing all that scene, the Chalk Farm, all that. Not the big roundhouse. There was a pub in Chalk Farm.
Yes.
I forget now.
The George Roby or something like that.
Yeah, and then Dan Tracy had his own Saturday night club in London as well, which I think was in North London, Islington.
Yes,
I'm not sure. Well, I forget the name of it now. What he called it, but.
So when you were on his
Look it
label,
up.
which had gone from Wham with I think 2 A's to Dreamworld, was it kind of just a one record deal, or were you?
Well, of course, there was no contracts. It was all, it was all a gentlemanly agreement with the label, and again, there was no management, so there were no contracts at all. It was just not professional, I suppose, but there might be some, benefits to that, and obviously there might not be some benefits to that as well.
Yes, it's a tricky business. So is this 84, 85 time you in the band, and then you get from there. Is it your John Peel session quite quickly, or do you release another single at this stage? Because your first John Peel session was, I think, September 85, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I'm sure that the John Peel session came after the release of Halcyon Days. The first one, when obviously we still didn't have a drummer. We were still using a drum machine.
Yes.
As can be heard on the session. We were playing concerts with the drum machine for certainly the first year, I'd say, and I think at first it might have been, oh, let's not bother with the drummer on Colin and Dave's part. Forgive me, Colin and Dave. I think that was the case, but there was obviously trying to find a person who it would work out with, he worked okay. I mean, he obviously takes a certain, or doesn't give you that kind of energy on stage, having a drum machine. Not in a small venue. I suppose it's different if you're Depeche Mode or something in an arena. But I don't know. I mean, it worked okay in those earlier songs because there was a certain amount of delicacy, I think, to the overall sound and, melodicism that was going on in the earlier songs. It's interesting because I listened to one of my favourite songs from that period earlier today, which is The First Pictures of You by the Lotus Eater. And I thought, well, actually, and then I heard a song on YouTube. I saw a song on YouTube by 1,000 Violins called My Beautiful Shirt. And I thought, oh, actually, I think that the early 1,000 Violins was very much in sort of the Lightning Seeds, and Lotus Eaters kind of vein, if you like. And in terms of the songwriting sensibility and the mood of it and all the rest of it, and the vocal melody line.
Because I think with the Lotus Eaters, that was is it Peter Coyne was the singer, but the band is the Wild Swans, who was
that was a fantastic band.
That was kind of Paul Simpson, and
Paul Simpson is a great singer hearing that song, Revolutionary Spirit, which I have in my collection, I think that was one of the, epoch kind of sounds for me early on as well, before, just before I joined 1,000 Violins, because I was very much into, all the Echo and the Bunnymen and, all this sort of post-punk thing I liked very much.
Basically,
but again, as it came out later on, my musical sort of interest is quite broad, and it always has been. It's broader now than it's ever been. But remember, I grew up on listening to great songs of the 60s and great singers of the 60s, and I do remember hearing things like The Walking Good was on the radio as a child, and the Burt Bacharach songs and stuff like that, and the Love Affair, bands like that, and I know that there were that impressed me, if you like, with the singing as well as the the overall sound. I mean, if you couldn't sing it, it's not worth it, kind of.
Yes. Because I know David Bowie was very influenced at times by Anthony Newley. So
yeah, of course,
that very strong delivery. It's not kind of mumbled, is it? It's very,
and obviously Scott Walker. And well, this is it. I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, you sound a bit like Lloyd Cole." I get that quite a lot, and I say, or Mark Almond sometimes, and I say, well. Yeah, I think what it is we're all influenced by Scott Walker, and mainly, which is undoubtedly the case with Bowie and Mark Almond, all, incredibly influenced by Scott Walker.
But would you say that's because of your vocal technique? Because a lot of
it might just be a happy, accident that. I suppose I'm the old-fashioned kind of croon style. I mean, I don't know what came first, really. I mean, as I said, I was listening to music like that from an extremely early age, and it deeply impressed me and moved me. And so perhaps I just learned to sing that way. I don't know, and it happened that I was able to kind of fit into that mode of singing, if you like. And the vocal cords allowed it, enabled it, if you like. And that's, again, sometimes when I'm looking at 1,000 Violins, I do think, and as I've commented, that, I think my singing style was definitely lends itself more to the 60s, I'm just not a shouty vocalist. In some ways, as a partner, would love to be. Yes. I love kind of Iggy Pop and all that and punk, but it's just not me. It's just not. It's not my voice, and so. There's no affectation whatsoever in the way I sing, and I sang 1,000 Violins. It's just.
So what's your then memory of the BBC, the first John Peel session? Because this is 85. And
as most people will appreciate, I mean, the respect to the John Peel show, and listening, I was obviously an avid listener at the time, like most people who were serious about music were. So yes, I mean, it obviously it was a magnificent thing to happen in many respects. I mean, to be doing the John Peel sessions and going to Maida Vale, which you heard about such a lot, I mean, it was kind of strange because the session, both of these sessions were produced by Dale Griffin.
From the Hoople fame.
Buffin from Mott. And obviously I grew up with Mott being, big heroes of mine, and still love them to this day. And so, but there was, Buffin, he's just 10 years on, or it was more than it was 10 years on. He's just, a guy now, and he wasn't the rock and roll star when I was a child, I sort of was conscious of as a child, because I looked at these people on Top of the Pops, those kind of stars, and they were like, for me, otherworldly. I mean, it was it's like you lost your rational side. It was hard to believe that they were just human.
Yes, no, they weren't human. They were superstars.
Absolutely, that's right. Because the presence and the world that those songs were creating and projecting is just, it was extraordinary. It wasn't it was beyond our everyday experience, and I think, you know, that's why it allowed it to have its impact. Obviously, things became a lot more mundane over time. They didn't, but music. And
Yes.
I think, obviously, that, you know, there was a certain, within that kind of C86 thing, it was the opposite. It was drab. You know, there was this element of being drab and not unglam and stuff like that, which, you know, is understandable, I suppose, given the kind of social context of it at the time. But again, you know, for me, I suppose there was some kind of a little bit of, well, this isn't, you know, quite top of the pops, and I'm not in a glitter suit, am I? You know, so is this the real thing, kind of thing, you know? But you know, without doubt, that I, you know, I identified with the music. I liked very much the songs that I was, you know, allowed to sing, and
yes. So when you
know, I gave it my all. I absolutely gave it my all, and you know, as in terms of, you know, making the song and trying to go with the song kind of thing, and do my best on a recording, you know, and so yeah, you know, I had very little sort of confidence at the time. Not that I extremely viewed it to this day, but you know, as I said, you know, I didn't fully see myself as you pinch, you know, I don't know if it's like pinching myself a little bit sometimes, or is this really happening, you know, going on to the John Peel thing, but you obviously, you know, to get in the van and play the gigs and stuff like that was a dream, really. I mean, you know, when I, as a child, and what else would I wanted to do? So, in that respect, you know, there was a lot of, you know, accomplishment and enjoyment and excitement, even if you were sometimes turning up at a pub out in, I don't know, the home counties, and at some point playing to 20 people, you know, that might, but nevertheless, you know, it was still nice to be in the back of the van.
Yes.
Albeit and that packet of digestive biscuits.
And at that age and time of year or time of life.
Exactly, yeah. So I was I was living the little dream.
The little dream, the big dream. I don't know. You're just living the dream. So with your the John Peel session, you did.
Yes.
I mean, the songs sound amazing. Why is it always December?
Always December? Yeah.
The Candleman, though it poured the next day, I never noticed the rain, and then the sun ain't going to shine anymore. Who came up with the set list for that particular?
Well, Colin Gregory, you know, is the main songwriter of 1000 Violins, so it was all directed by him in terms of the set, you know, what was going to be recorded and all the rest of it, and what we were ready to do. It was Colin's decision to do The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore. I think probably he wanted to, you know, place the music of 1000 Violins, or reference that kind of 60s pop heritage, if you like, and or to flag up the you know, the reference, if you like, and where we were kind of coming from, and you know, which is fair enough. You know, I think some of those songs, they have the, you know, a great kind of 60s pop feel to them. I mean, but the thing is they haven't got that arrangement to them. They've got C86 guitars in them, but you can hear, you know, nice Burt Bacharach kind of choruses at times, and you know.
Yes. But I was also looking at, you know, quite a few of your flyers or posters for gigs. So you were sort of playing and supporting and sometimes headlining some amazing evenings with people like My Bloody Valentine, Micro Disney, people like that. So
Yeah.
did you feel like you were sort of on a sort of mission? It's like the Blues Brothers, really, isn't it? Did you feel you were on some sort of trip at this stage?
Well, obviously we were kind of in it and not in it, to be honest with you, and that's how it felt. I mean, we were obviously playing, on that scene with all those names, but we seemed to be a bit more not a part of the scene, and it wasn't a deliberate thing. I don't know. Maybe it was just how I felt, but and when you think about it, I mean, people obviously like archetypal bands like Tallulah Gotch, for example, at the time, and they used to allow us to stay with them as well, very kindly. So yes, we obviously were.
Yes,
but there wasn't a lot of. What I'm saying is there wasn't any. We weren't really rubbing along together, if you know what I mean. There was no kind of hanging out. This is what I'm saying. There was no hanging out together. None of that. We weren't sort of hanging around that scene. I mean, we were based in Sheffield anyway, so.
Yes.
But no, we were kind of
it's
a little
amazing.
bit excommunicated.
Yeah, it's just sometimes laughing at some of the, well, not literally laughing, but just smiling at the idea that, there was a night with you, the shop assistants and the soup dragons for £2.
Yeah, and that's
for
£2.
That was...
I remember supporting the Lars in Camden, Panic Station Camden, which for me, was exciting because I like that band. And a highlight for me, another highlight was when we supported the Triffids at Sheffield Lead Mill. And we still had the drum machine at that point.
Yes.
I remember walking into the toilets and there was the late great David McComb, and he was having a shave in the wash basin in the toilets, poor man. It was for me, that was a highlight because, that was a band that I kind of looked up to and revered, and to be playing with these tonight, this was just really exciting, So, we were contemporaries, I suppose, obviously.
So what then happens? That's 85, 86. This is the height of indie pop now, let's face it. 86, 87, things are, freaking out with excitement. At that stage, I mean, you've still got another John Peel session. The band have, you're going to release an album as well, aren't you? A kind of mini album, Please Don't Sandblast My House.
Yeah, that mini album, that was actually, came out on the Constrictor label, and as people might have been observed, we have original copies. That some of the titles were given were retitled to get round difficulties, I think, with that they had with Fire Publishing. It was trying to evade them. So Halcyon Days became, what was it, Days of Calm Weather or something?
Right.
It was Days of Calm Weather in Winter. It was retitled for the album and lost to the world. I think that was the Candleman, and they were actually good recordings, I think. Yeah.
Yes. So
and they ended up on a 1000 Violins compilation.
Was that the one that came out on Vinyl Japan or Cherry Red?
It was on Cherry Red, wasn't it? And I think there was a Vinyl Japan one, which I wasn't even aware of it coming out at the time, the Vinyl Japan one, but they definitely, all those versions are on the Cherry Red compilation, yeah.
Yes, exciting stuff. So your next John Peel session, which was like, crikey.
Yeah, we had a drummer by this time.
You had, was it Ian who came in on drums at that stage?
No, it was Pete Addy who was playing.
Oh, Pete, sorry, yes.
Our drums, who was a friend of Colin and Dave's, I think, from Yorkshire, Halifax. He was a friend of theirs. He was at university at the time, and so you just come down for rehearsals in Sheffield and play the gigs. Obviously, that became a bit of a strain, I think, as the band became a bit more in demand in terms of Pete's availability.
Yes.
And so, you know, it was basically, I think, you know, that was behind the decision to try to look for another drummer who's perhaps more available.
Yes. So what was it like when you were recording Hey Man, That's Beautiful? This is on Immaculate. Before then you had Locked Out of
the Loving, yeah, that was on Dream World, yeah, which is a great single, again, with a great chorus. Well, you know, when I hear that, again, I'm quite taken aback by how good it is, quite simply. You know, yeah.
Yes, that's amazing. Were you how was the band coping then? Because you'd had sort of almost 3-4 years of indie.
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, this is really probably what held the band back. It was that there wasn't any management or anybody really moving the band, and the way the music industry worked back then, you had to have, you know, either a good publisher and manager or some sort of publicist, even, you know, on the independent scene. I do think that, you know, I mean, labels would want you to have a manager before they. I mean, certainly large labels who had the clout to get you, to promote you and get you into the charts. And we're talking the real chart, the big one, rather than the indie chart. The reason why I think that is, you know, a salient point with what we're discussing 1,000 Violins is because I think that it's my view that there was the potential there, you know, to have reached a larger audience in terms of the songs, and you know, the presentation would have needed to have changed a little bit, I think. But you know, I mean, you get, you know, that I think you've got that song right. That songwriting, we would have been a great singles band in the charts. I mean, it was observed by, I think, a few reviewers in the music press at the time that, you know, we're a good singles band, I think, or one of the best undiscovered singles band. I think somebody even said, I might have quoted it on the sleeve notes to the second John Peel session, which is to be released.
Yes.
But obviously there was the potential there, but you would have needed somebody to, you know, moved it along a bit more in the way that you had to make it more of a commercially viable proposition.
Yes.
Because I think the music was very accessible. You know, you can sing along to it, to those songs. So I think, yeah, they had there was a lot of potential there, which probably wasn't really, you know, made the most of.
Yes, well, I think, I suppose looking back, you can see why certain bands like U2 were probably were razor focused. They had the management, they had that drive, and they put the time in. But the second John Peel session has a great song on it. If I Were a Bullet, then for sure I'd find a place to your heart. I mean, when you were presented the lyrics, were they always very easy to sing, and you kind of thought, yep, that's another classic?
Yeah, there was nothing that I ever felt uncomfortable with in any way, really. You know, I think sometimes I had to get a little bit tongue-in-cheek with the baby kind of thing, but the sentiment of the songs was always something that I would that I was always able to sort of go along with, really. You know, if I were a bullet, yeah.
It's a Yeah, I know. I always
I do kind of, and when I listen back, actually, I think I relate more strongly now to those words than maybe I was conscious of at the time. But they certainly kind of were not really outside my lived experience. Let's put it like that. In fact, they were probably quite attuned to it in some respects.
So what was your last kind of studio recording with the band?
Well, the last recordings I made with 1000 Violins, as people will know, that was late towards, it was about the autumn of 87. Which was when the guy called Nigel Reveller, who'd been in Gentle Giants, and it's Phil O'Connor, who is Hazel's brother. They had a kind of production of, they wanted to do a label, I think.
Right.
And they'd obviously been watching 1000 Violins come to the gigs and stuff, and liking. I mean, we had become much better than obviously when we started out in '85 with the drum machine. We were very good live and had a lot of energy live, and I think they saw the potential there. But it was still pretty small time, really. So it was with a view to signing up the band for a recording contract, and Colin Dave with the publishing deal. But I did the single. I mean, I was coming to the end of things with the band, and I announced that I was discontented in '87, and not entirely blaming anybody for it. I'd done 4 years with the band, and I just reached a point, I think, when I'm beginning to just feel a little bit more frustrated with it. I wanted to be, I think, take more of a creative, just be able to explore more creatively with something.
Yeah.
That was moving me towards just, wanting to leave. It was never really going to, it was asking a commitment. I wasn't really signing the contract. I wasn't really wanting to make anymore. So I did, I did the one single with them, and I was kind of, and that feeling didn't go away, really. But great. It was a great last single.
So what was that label? What was the label?
It was Immaculate Records.
Right.
Was the label.
And was that All Aboard the Love?
No, that was after me. They released the album, didn't they? 1000 Violins, with Vince, who came after me as the singer. That was the name of their album, title of their album, All Aboard the Love Mobile. That wasn't the song that was around when I was in the band. There are some songs, I think, on the Janice Long, which was the last session that I recorded with 1000 Violins and Radio 1 shows, which is Janice Long session, which I think tends to get overlooked. And I think it was a very good session, I recall. That would be, when Ian was playing on the drums by that point. And I hope one day that might get a bit more attention and might see the light of day. I'm not even sure that one's on YouTube. Maybe someone's got it somewhere.
Yes.
I'm sure it's obtainable, but I think it's a good session. But yeah, there are some songs on there which I sang for the Janice Long session, which may have turned up on the On Board the Love Mobile album, which Vince went on to sing. But there might be a couple, I don't know.
Right. So the guy from, did you say, was it Nigel from Gentle Giant, did you say?
Yeah, Nigel Reveler, who had been in the band Gentle Giant, and Phil O'Connor, Hazel O'Connor's brother, who was actually in quite a good band called The Flies.
Oh.
Late 70s band called The Flies. Yeah. So I was aware of him when we did that session. And, they were nice guys. I mean, I obviously they didn't really want me to leave, but
yes, it's always difficult, So that was the end. Did it feel strange when you sort of found somebody else stepping into your kind of shoes and on the mic, or did you just kind of avoid?
Well, I didn't really take a great deal of interest, to be honest with you. I was like following, what 1,000 Violins were doing. After I left, the other kind of strange thing was that they played in Manchester when I was living in Manchester by that time, and that was kind of strange because they're playing tonight, but I'm not there. I mean, I enjoyed the live performance very much, and so. There was. It wasn't an easy decision for me whatsoever. I mean, there was a certain sadness of having to let go because I had enjoyed performing those songs. It was just, I don't know, it's just a great sort of opportunity to sort of sing, which, so there was, and it wasn't because, again, I suddenly didn't like those songs, because that wasn't the case. I continued to like the songs. I mean, I don't know, I'm not sure about maybe some of the later ones, but but I'm just going by the titles. So, yes. I mean, and that's not always the best indication,
Yes. And that was you with the 1,000 Violins. Did you have you had any communication with any of the members, kind of, or with this release, with these releases?
Well, I've actually heard from Colin, which was very nice, and it's good to know that everything's good with him and stuff like that, and things have worked out well for him, etc. So yes, I have, and that's not been unwelcome. I'm not in contact with anyone, and there's no, from my point of view, there's never any personal dislike of anybody. That's not the reason why I wanted to eventually leave the band. As it was literally, I had to move on. I mean, I was in contact with a guy who was living in London who moved over from France, and he was looking for someone to sing and write songs with. And he wanted to move away from London, and so he needed somebody, I suppose, to make it more of a commitment to that as well. So it wouldn't have been that practical, for me. I couldn't have done the two. So something had to give, and I suppose I just thought, well, it's been 4 years, and I think I've probably done what I can with the band, and
yes,
and it's done what it can for me, and that's probably it, really.
Yeah. Which is,
but I can still sing those songs and hoovering and
excellent.
So and they still play around in my head.
I'm not surprised, especially recently. But what did you do? Any other musical projects after?
Well, yeah, I mean, so the guy who I met through Melody Maker, and a guy called Eve Altana, and we moved up to Manchester, and it was just the need to relocate because I hadn't really got a place to call home, and I don't think he had much either. So we were just moved up to Manchester because it was only going to be Manchester or Liverpool, and I think Manchester just seemed a bit more familiar, and probably because of Coronation Street. But so we decided to move up here, which I don't regret whatsoever because it was for me a very good move, which allowed me, I think, to have a bit of a life and to become a bit more of an adult, which I certainly was not when I was in 1000 Violins. I think I was somebody who was, very, very, had very little experience of life, really. Life was something that happened for other people, not to me. It's allowed me to grow. And this is the strange thing, again, about the time in 1000 Violins, because people might have thought, and I read some of the clippings as well, which suggest, this is a band that's got such potential and all the rest of it. The vast majority of the press was great potential, and all the rest of it. And often a rather good singer.
Yes.
And yet this had absolutely no impact upon my self-confidence whatsoever as a person. And there's no affectation here. That I was just very, very, introverted, kind of totally lacking in self-confidence. Certainly not able to assert myself in any way. Spent a lot of my time not entirely happy. That's maybe what you can hear sometimes in the singing. But yeah, the irony is because a lot of people might have said, at that time when you're a young guy, wow, you're on stage and, you sing and stuff like this. And yet it didn't change me. It didn't really change my life. Maybe I was expecting too much. I don't know. There was no sex, if only. There was no drugs. Well, not for me anyway, boys. And, so there was just the rock and roll, which was not a bad thing.
No.
There was, I didn't play any of that for what, a lot of people would have paid it for,
Yes.
I didn't communicate with people. I mean, a lot of people, some other people might have, made an effort to maybe made more contacts with people in the music industry and said, well, I'd like to move on from this band. It never even occurred to me, it never even occurred to me to do anything like that.
Yeah. So were you then surprised when Nick from Precious Recordings of London got in touch, or how did that process then work kind of in the last few years for these two releases to come out?
Well, yes, it was a surprise, but then so was the Cherry Red compilation that came out when they contacted me.
Yes.
I'm not even sure. I think they contacted me through Eve, actually, the guy I moved to Manchester with. And yes, we did had a band up here called Chrysalids, and we had one commercial release. I think it turned up on C90 compilation a couple of years ago. A song that we did called "My Heart Is Where My Home Is."
Right.
We had some interest with the Chrysalids as well from Mock Turtle's manager and stuff. when we moved up to Manchester, of course, there were we trying to write these songs that are very much verse chorus, and hey, Manchester happened. So we were it was kind of strange, really, and funny, because we were rehearsing in rehearsal rooms in Chorlton, Manchester, right next door to the Stone Roses, who was big in Manchester at the time, but were unknown throughout the rest of the country at that point. So we were constantly hearing, the bass to "I Want to Be Adored" and what have you from the band in the next room. But it was not anyway. We could not latch onto any of that Manchester thing. It just wasn't us at all.
Yeah.
But I mean, Eve went on to, we did a compilation a few years ago of Chris Lids, put out those recordings and stuff, which I'm very pleased with and proud of, and they are, I think, out there on the internet for people to hear. And Eve went on to play with some of the other Mancunian bands like the Chameleons and I Am Clue, and he's played with Peter Buck and stuff, as well. But
I think he was. Did he also have a period with a Norwich band called the Bardos?
The Bardos. Oh yes, he did. Eve, of course, he produced the Bardos, and they were a band that I very much liked, and I think brought to his attention. And they asked, I did do one track with them where I did some backing vocals for them on one of their singles.
Right.
He did. Eve produced the Bardos, yes. Who, he does some music production as well these days.
Yes. Oh, yes.
But so it's all a surprise, really. But but thankfully it's all sounding good to me. Still. Which is the main thing.
And has it been the case then with this release and Nick getting in touch and having it brought out? Has it felt quite nice to sort of reconnect with the music from that period and kind of, I don't know, process it and feel a little bit more kind of relaxed or a little bit more generous towards that experience, and also kind of connecting with Colin again? Does it feel like the band feels a lot nicer now than it possibly had done, in the past?
Yes, certainly. As I said, listening back to the music, it's something that I'm still pleased to listen to, and not embarrassed by. And as I said, I do think, and so I've been surprised actually. Like when I've heard I've probably said this earlier, but I've genuinely been surprised when I've listened to some of those earlier recordings that I was actually a lot better, as I said, than I realised at the time. And there's a copy or a version of My Beautiful Shirt on YouTube, which is from a cassette recording, home cassette recording. So the quality's really bad, but thinking I listened to it quite recently, and again I thought, wow, I actually sang that quite well,
You sound it sounds like your self-confidence sometimes lacks, doesn't it?
Yes, I think so. And self-confidence isn't my best friend, but it's got better, as I said, and it's kind of strange because when I say I can listen back to those recordings, and I think, well, actually, that I have to, speak for myself, but I think that the vocals just sound very accomplished and impassioned, and I did good things, with the words and the way I sang them and stuff, and
yes,
it was very, it sounds heartfelt still, so it's still the essence of it is still there to be heard, and it isn't. People will certainly connect with it.
Well, it'll
there's
be
no raps in the middle, but
no raps. No.
But anyway, if you can live with that, then there's some good songs out there in that.
I think it'll be interesting to see
repertoire.
what happens. It'll be interesting to see the kind of response after these two releases. And
I mean, they're very professionally put out, aren't they? What he's done with Precious. He struggles to find photographs again, of the band, because we weren't really a well-oiled commercial entity, and again, that's the irony, because perhaps in the right hands it could have been,
Yes.
But I said on the sleeve notes, it's not difficult to imagine those songs being on daytime radio. Some of them, not all, but some of them definitely could have been blended into daytime radio, particularly in those days when Radio 1, Radio 2 would play a good blend of, and the charts had a big array of different musical styles within it. So I think there was the potential there, on an artistic level to have made an impact.
Well, I find it interesting because when you listen to things like Easterhouse, the Chameleons, yourself, I mean, all that, I don't feel like it's dated like some of that 80s production that was on top of the pops.
No, absolutely. No, we haven't got I think the nearest we came to that was Halcyon Days, with the recordings with Pascal Gabriel, where you'll hear that big drum sound on the original Halcyon Days single, though there is another recording of Halcyon Days, which is on that Constrictor label compilation, which has got a different a new middle eight section to it, which works far better, to be honest with you. But no, it doesn't sound. It hasn't got the 80s, Phil Collins sound. No. And that's perhaps why it doesn't sound too of that period.
Yes, the Trevor
in terms of production, anyway.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, just lastly, if you could have whispered something to your 16, 18-year-old self starting out, is there anything that you'd have gone, oh yes, I would just say that to that person, even if you would have ignored it with all your experience and
I'd say that too.
What would you say to you, if you bumped into your 16-year-old self back then? Is there any little word of wisdom you would have given them, or direction that you might have mentioned, to them?
Well, I would have probably said it will get better, but I probably wouldn't have believed them.
I know this is true, isn't it? We would just say, no, that won't get better. How can you say that? It's the 80s. But it's slightly, we muddle through, don't we? And then we change. But yes, well, no, it's good. Well, look, thank you ever so much, John, for giving me the time for this. I mean, it's been great to hear the interview and also hear your story and also hear a lot more of the music again. I'm really curious with the Janice Long session will be fascinating to hear.
It would, wouldn't it? Yeah, bless her. Yeah. Well, I hope it's, thrown some light onto 1,000 Violins, and
oh God, yes,
for those who remain interested and some who might want to develop an interest.
Well, it's good. I did notice on the Bandcamp page of One Violin.
Oh, he's the one.
1,000 Violins for the Precious recordings. I mean, it looks like it's selling well. I mean,
is it?
Yeah,
I didn't even know it'd been released yet. I mean, I knew it was coming out, but I didn't know the official release date.
No, I don't think it has been released, but I guess it's orders.
Okay.
There's orders. So if you go to their Bandcamp page, you'll see that it says, there's things look good, which I'm pleased for Nick because he's just a genius, isn't he?
Well, absolutely. Yeah, I've seen all the releases that he's been putting out. I wouldn't mind I've been thinking of treating myself to the Bodine sessions actually.
Yes, well,
Yeah, they're a band that I liked very much.
The guy's got class. I mean, he's so good, so good. So I was very excited actually because like some of it, to be honest, indie pop can sometimes be a bit irritating when it's like, oh yeah, that's just that indie pop. Whereas some of it, like I said, the Chameleons or Easterhouse, yourself, there's something kind of like, that's a bit more of a crafted album. It's a bit of a more substance. Some of it is brilliant, but it's of its time, which was quite short and sweet, and I loved it then. But yes, it was fun, but some of it sounds a lot better than I can remember. So it's
sure.
good. Yeah. And hurrah for John Peel. That's what we say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you ever so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yes, it's been amazing. And look, have a lovely evening. And yes, all the best for the release and the fan mail.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, take care, and thanks again, John.
Much appreciated. And a long goodbye to everybody.
Goodbye.
Take care.
Yes, and buy those records. Okay, see you later. Bye-bye.
All right then. All the
Bye-bye.
best. Bye.
And that, dear listener, is the end of the interview. You probably guessed that. Anyway, a massive thank you to John Wood for giving me the time for that interview. That was lead singer of the 1000 Violins. And as I mentioned at the beginning and throughout the interview, the Precious Recordings of London have got these 2 John Peel sessions available for downloads and pre-order, I do believe. They're coming out on the 3rd of July, 2023, and stunning. That's all I've got to say. Anyway, the C86 Show, I'm David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show. All these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. Check them out. There's a lot of indie interviews. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.